So another 5-minute discussion, and today I am joined by the lovely Sharon Lawton, a fellow DISC practitioner, trained by the Coaching Academy, and in fact you now train for the Coaching Academy as well. So it is really great to see you today, Sharon. And just before I hit record, we were talking about the fact that DISC for me is all about the workplace and the workforce and how you interact with your colleagues, etc. And yet you are all about the family and how the families interact. Now, for me, the workplace isn't there. Everything's online. So I'm helping my clients deal with that. But how is lockdown affecting not so much your work, but the families that you work with? I mean, what have you seen?
Yeah, it's really interesting because now, because of lockdown, we're probably spending more time with our families than we ever did. And, for a lot of us, we're spending time with them in much closer proximity, which magnifies so much, doesn't it? So actually, sort of being aware of our DISC style preferences, for a lot of my clients, have found that really, really helpful because they're being able to modify and adapt their behaviour to get the best out of their relationships, because DISC, as you well know, is a perfect model to help us to, avoid and manage potential conflicts and understand that stuff isn't personal. It's about those behavioural preferences. So I think it's a really helpful tool, both in the corporate, but particularly at the moment in the workplace, just to help us understand ourselves and others a little bit better.
Yeah. So in DISC terms, we talk about our autopilot, that what we're self like. We talk about the mask, so what we feel that we are perceived as in our environment. But that middle one, the one of us under pressure, which I'm seeing a lot more people, as we've been in lockdown for a while, that pressure is really being exaggerated now. I know my own style, and we talked about. You talk about your housework if you want to, but it is about that pressure point, isn't it? That's really being exaggerated now. And yeah. I mean, how does that affect the family balance as well?
Yeah, I think it's a valuable tool actually, for us to be aware of that. That middle graph, that graph number 2, our stress response, because we're under a huge amount of situational stress at the moment. And the situation is COVID. And so, as I say, we were laughing before we started recording because, outside of the workplace, I'm more of a high DI preference. And, so I need to feel like I've got a little bit of control. And of course, when we went into lockdown, I didn't have any control. So the only thing I could control was being able to go out at a time that nobody else was. So I was up really early to go out for my, my one piece of exercise in the day. And I could control how clean my house was. So I was anti-backing everything. But if you think about sort of the other styles as well, if we're not aware that under stress our preferences can potentially change, then we're not able to sort of make allowances for maybe behaviour that we are not used to, or perhaps might irritate us a little bit more. Remember, if we've got a child that is perhaps a very high S preference, this lockdown, that lack of security, perhaps routines have gone, perhaps, that can be quite disconcerting. Maybe all of a sudden they've completely withdrawn, shut down, been very, very quiet. Or potentially, a child who has a high D style preference, again, might be really sort of acting up and pushing the boundaries a lot more than perhaps they would do. So I think in families, they're being aware of those DISC style preferences can be really helpful. Even if they haven't had a profile, just to have a basic awareness, I think can be absolutely game changing for families. And also for teachers out there as well, because they're going back and, knowing how we respond under stress is hugely important, isn't it?
And that's the thing now, everyone's starting to talk about how we go back out, and actually the anxieties that is of, well, actually, I mean, I did one on the workplace the other day, and yes, the workplace can change, but actually the getting to the workplace is where it could be an issue. And whilst you say the S style, the ones that like the stability, that don't like the change, probably didn't like the initial lockdown, but now they're in lockdown and they've got that change, they've got that stability. That's great. But now suddenly we're going to go back out again and we've got to change again. And no one knows what that's going to look like on the other side. So it is. I mean, I have to be honest, as an outgoing peoply person, I am wanting to get back out again now.
Yeah. And if you think about that sort of change, that transition in families and or schools, you know, young people and teachers, you know, the D style preference, if they've got a primary D style preference, you know, they're probably already sort of, you've got themselves organised and, you know, they're ready to go back. They've already problem solved what the potential pitfalls are. You know, they've gone out and sort of, you know, actively thought about what those problems are going to be, what those challenges are going to be, and they've already sorted them out. You know, the high I style preferences are just like, can't wait to connect, as you were saying there, Vic. You know, we've already spoken about the S, but what about those C style preferences? You know, they are going to need that sort of, okay, so what's the procedure? You know, how are things going to be? What's the detail around this? I need to know a little bit more about, you know, sort of safety. And so there's a lot to consider. And often, as you well know, we manage or we parent or we interact or communicate in our own style, thinking that everybody else is the same. So, you know, one of the things that I coach parents and teachers on is actually to step out of your style and have a look at what the styles are of the others so that you can get the best interaction out of them.
Yeah. I mean, I just love disc, as you know, and I know you do too as well. And we could probably talk about this for hours. In fact, I will. When I stop recording, I will carry on talking. But it's lovely. It's lovely to have you on and talk about it. Obviously, I'll tag you in stuff as well. So if you're wanting to know about disc and how it affects the family, teaching, and that kind of stuff, please do get in contact with Sharon. If you want to know about the workplace, then get in contact with me. See you on the other side.
Sure. And that's the great thing, isn't it? Because disc is such a brilliant tool. It's transferable in all areas, in all industries. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on.
My pleasure, Sharon.